changes introduced by social engineers in the guise of statesmen over the course of the last century. Through the New Deal, the Fair Deal, the Great Society, and the ostensible war on poverty that actually increased poverty. Suffice it to say that in every case, big government won, self-government lost. Only two of our presidents even tried to stop this: Calvin Coolidge and Ronald Reagan. Those presidents also happened to preside over the number one and the number two longest periods of peacetime economic growth in American history. What we should realize, however, is that the big government Democrats have no intention of stopping with a statist healthcare system. And maybe our panel would like to talk about what's going to happen next. But I know Obama is trying to encroach even more on education, both at the university and at the school level. I also know that there's a lot of talk right now about nationalized, not health care, but child care. The articles are already starting. Child care as a right and an entitlement. Wilson at least had to explain himself. Democrats and many Republicans these days do not even feel compelled to do so. President Obama is supposedly, he is by trade, a constitutional lawyer. Tell me, how many times have you heard him refer to, defer to, or invoke the Constitution of the United States? I can't think of one. He thinks he can count on our people being without constitutional scruple. He imagines that he can get us to sell our birthright of self-government for the bowl of pottage that is government health care. The terrifying thing is that the last 100 years of our history suggests that he is right. But it is true that the progressive Democrats, the social engineers, the community organizers, call them what you will, have had to change their tune a little. Deep down, the American people don't want to be kept in a hive or herded into a corral. They aren't the jealous type. They don't begrudge the wealthy of their wealth any more than they do the beautiful their beauty or the intelligent their smarts. The American people know that anyone in America can better his own condition if he has the will to do so. Deep down, people suspect that the thing that may get in their way is the very intrusive government that promises to solve all their problems. That's why in 2008, an election we shall long regret, the Obama campaign came up with an absolutely brilliant slogan, invoked at key moments in the race: "Yes, we can." The slogan was brilliant because it was entirely American. The yes, perhaps, stood in contrast to the much maligned Republicans, the party of the rich or the party of the no in the Democrat formula. The word can, though, is the kicker. There is no word more American than can. Over 200 years ago, before even there was a United States, Benjamin Franklin said that in America, we do not judge a man for who he is, that is, by his lineage or title or background, but rather by what he can do. I remember my mother never allowing me to use the word can't in her presence, except that because we lived in Texas, we didn't pronounce it like y'all do. We said can't. Can't never could was her watchword. Can't never could and never will. Then she told me about this wonder that she called elbow grease. I don't know if kids still learn about elbow grease these days. For most Americans, even today, I believe can't is a four-letter word. What we have to wonder then is, who is this we? An uninformed spectator might think that we are the American people. But that can't be right. What single thing does President Obama think the American people can do on their own? We can't buy cars on our own. We can't run car companies on our own. We can't own a house on our own. We can't go to college on our own. We certainly can't be expected to look after our own health, though we're the ones who bear the aches and the pains. We can't be trusted to save when we ought to save and spend when we ought to spend. No, the we in yes we can is plainly the government, and a special kind of government, one that spares an ever-growing portion of the people the use of their elbow grease, and thereby takes a part of their soul. The whole message of the Obama administration is one of telling the American people what they can not do. He is trying to convince Americans, the people of Can, that they should give themselves over to a cynical, entitlement-grabbing politics of can't. From the perspective of the progressive Democrat, my remarks sound mean-spirited, as though I only care, as though conservative Republicans or free market classical liberals only care about money and wealth. But though wealth, the reflection of a person's personal industry and courage, is nothing to sneeze at, that's the least of my worries. The real issue between the principled conservative and the progressive Democrat is one of habits, of individual self-government, of the pursuit of happiness as understood by the Founding Fathers, and dare I say, of hope in human beings. The most profound thing perhaps ever said about the welfare state in the progressive agenda did not come from an economist or a political philosopher, not from a constitutional lawyer or a conservative pundit. It came from an obscure, hardworking, poorly educated, and what sociologists would call an upper-lower class black man, though he did not think of himself in that way. When that man was asked by his radical grandson, whom the older man had raised and been tough on so that he would make good in the world, when the older man was asked why even in the middle of the Depression he had not gone on public assistance, like everyone else, he abruptly responded, "Because it takes away your manhood." This man knew that being on the dole, whether you're poor or middle class or rich, and we all have our separate entitlements now, is simply debilitating to the human character. The younger man scoffed at the time. He was learning a very different ethic in college, an ethic about how entire social classes and races were owed something by their oppressors or by the rich, who were one and the same. The only reason we know such a conversation took place and that there was such a man is the stubborn grandfather who refused to see things the modern way, is that the grandson, who grew out of his radical entitlement mindset, was Terrance Thomas. Terrance Thomas, as many of you know, is one of the great heroes of our age and offers one of the most amazing rags to riches stories in our history. And yet a man who is reviled by members of his own race, and just as many by those not of his race, in barely concealed racist categories. The public reaction to Justice Thomas's life and his lessons from the bench is a measure of the distance of our world from the world created by the Founding Fathers. What we need to understand is that to win some elections and to effect a partial, half-hearted reform of Obamacare, and then to go about our business, will be to play a few moments on the defense and then voluntarily turn the ball back over to the other team in some future election, the team that's had the ball most of this liberty-limiting century. Tonight I say, let's be men again. I guess about half of you should be women again. Let's be self-governing individuals who resolve to have a government to do the things that only governments can do, such as fight the enemies and keep a sound dollar, and run a court system that puts the bad guys in jail and maintains civil relations among the good. At the same time, let's be citizens who can otherwise do for ourselves. Let's be a kind of people who don't expect a $10 million park in Wausau or Walla Walla or Waxahachie to be paid for out of the general fund in Washington. Let's be a people who can save for their own retirement and bring up their own children and one day send them to college, if that makes sense. Let's be Americans again. Let's be the people of Can, who refuse to fill our bellies momentarily with the paltry pottages of the politics of can't. Let's live as free human beings guided by our Constitution, our conscience, and our trust in God, and not as bees in a stifling, soul-destroying hive.
And Troy Polamalu does that great also, but I love how he always on the front. No matter who does the ball, where they're going, he's going to